Good evening and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's cablecast or televised post agenda regarding COVID pay for Monday, December 7th. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title of the bill?
Bill 927, an ordinance providing for special conditions for the operation and use of paid sick under the Paid Sick Days Act during and due to the crisis presented by COVID-19 through inclusion in the Pittsburgh Code of Ordinance, Chapter 626A, Temporary Emergency COVID-19 Paid Sick Conditions.
Thank you, and I'll just correct myself. It's not televised, it's a Zoom meeting. So thank you very much. And I would like to say that we are joined by council members Kraus, Lavelle, Gross, Strasburger, Coghill, and Wilson. And before we begin, let me just lay some groundwork. We're joined by guest Sam Williamson from SEIU, Dan Gilman from the Mayor's Office, Chief of Staff at the Mayor's Office. The Law Department Allegheny Conference was invited, but I do know John Graff is attending from the Priory Hospitality Group, and I believe on behalf of the conference. So with that said, I just want to just make an opening statement that I'm glad that we have all been working together over this past week or so since this has been introduced. It is a piece from the administration. I have, it came under my name as the sponsor because I brought it under my committee for the Mayor's Office, but it is a piece that the Mayor's Office has been working on. And I'm thankful that they've been working with a lot of people trying to get this to a place where everybody's comfortable. And I think it's important that we all work together because as we've seen through these COVID times, we have seen a lot of our SEIU workers, nurses, healthcare, SEIU healthcare, and a lot of people in the hospitality industry, nurses working, hospitality industry, needing some help because, a lot of the hotels and other places have not been open. So we know that there's a lot of struggle and yet a lot of dependency on our unions, but there's also been a lot of help coming to us from our business community. I don't know where the city of Pittsburgh, quite frankly, would have been without John Deagle and the Eaton Park Hospitality Group, but there's just been so much that we've seen with them feeding people, giving boxes of food, helping supply and stock food pantries across the city, across the region. And so I just want to say we're in this together, and I'm glad to see that we're working through this together as well. With that said, I'm going to give it for everyone an opening statement, about 3 minutes, if you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes, and then we'll open it up to members of council for questions. And we'll begin with Chief of Staff Gilman from Mayor Peduto's office.
Thank you, Madam President and council members and my fellow guests. Council President, you really hit the nail on the head with your opening remarks. We introduced this bill because with the rising COVID numbers, which since we introduced it have increased exponentially, we know we must, number one, all do our part to stop the spread of the virus, and number two, support each other, workers and businesses alike. And unfortunately, for so many of our neighbors who are housing and food insecure, their jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, are the difference between making a rent and mortgage payment, putting food on the table for their kids, being able to afford the equipment they need for their kids to learn virtually, and so many other critical things at the moment. And so we know we have workers waking up who may have a fever and a scratchy throat or a cough, and they're not sure they have COVID. They're not intentionally spreading, but they think they need to risk going to work because they need that paycheck. And going to work is endangering their coworkers and the general public. And we need to make sure we have a system in place that allows them to stay home, to take care of themselves or to take care of their loved one who is sick and not risk losing their livelihood. At the same time, we recognize small businesses and all businesses are struggling. I certainly won't speak with experts like Mr. Graff on who know better than anyone. I mean, you look at what's happening in so many restaurants, so many of our, certainly our hotel industry and tourism industry, our office tenancy. We know businesses are struggling, and the last thing we want to do is harm them. And let me be clear, we shouldn't be in this place because we should have a federal government that takes action. Unfortunately, we don't. We have a federal government who has dropped the ball on this like they have so many other things, and we are left as Pittsburghers and as a city to take action. It's not the exact bill I would write if we were the federal government and could do certain things differently. but it's the best bill given the conditions on the city of Pittsburgh. Since the time we introduced it, two important things have happened. Number one, the CDC has changed their guidelines from 14 to 10 days, which is significant. And number two, to the credit of the business community and labor, people have come together to work to make the bill stronger, clearer, and a compromise that helps everyone. So I sent all members yesterday a new version. We're going to make a few more amendments, and I'll get that to council again tonight for a requested amend by substitution tomorrow. But for the public's benefit, the most significant changes are that we're taking the number of sick days from or hours from 112 down to 80. That's 2 weeks. That's 10 days. That's in line with the change by the CDC guidelines. We've also clarified that really the 4 reasons that you can use this leave is: number 1, you're sick; number 2, you're caring for a sick individual; number 3, you have symptoms of being sick; or number 4, you're caring for someone who has symptoms of being sick. That's the critical areas we need for people to stay home and take care of themselves. You do not need to have a positive test. We know that that is a burden with the testing system, the transportation, particularly for people who may not have easy transportation or a primary care physician. We don't want to require that positive test first. We just ask that an employee notify their employer as soon as possible about the need to use the sick time. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop because I know there are other guests and council members, is 2 key functions to this. We have worked very hard to keep this separate from the paid sick leave law that council worked on in the past. We do not in any way want to legally jeopardize that, and they're 2 separate things. And philosophically, they're different. The mayor introduced this bill because there's a recognition that we are in emergency times. So whatever the sick leave policy was for the city or an individual company that went above and beyond, this is a unique moment. And we're saying there needs to be something unique about it. So just because someone has sick leave generally doesn't mean they don't need extra time because of COVID. And more importantly, if they have to use the time in January or February because of COVID, we don't then, hopefully, knock on wood, we have a vaccine and go back to some semblance of normal this summer or spring. We don't want someone then having the rest of the year with no sick time left for when their child gets the flu or they get food poisoning, or their mom has an emergency doctor's appointment that they have to run to. Those are still the reasons we need sick time for all Americans and all Pittsburghers. This is an emergency. And so we're working very hard to keep those 2 things separate. Thank you, Council President.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for your comments and for all your work on this. I know you've worked a lot on it. Can we next have Sam Williamson from SEIU?
Good evening. Nice to see you all. And thank you, Madam President, for having me on this evening. I'm the Western Pennsylvania Director of SEIU Local 32BJ. Let me begin first by thanking Mayor Peduto for introducing this bill, thanking Council for moving it forward so quickly. Thank Council President Kel Smith for moving the scheduling so quickly, because we're in a crisis, and working people across the city desperately need the measures that you guys are debating and that the mayor has proposed. Probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. 32BJ is fully in support of this ordinance, including the amendments that Chief Gilman spoke to a few minutes ago. Our members are frontline essential workers. They're security officers, cleaners, college campus food service workers who have been at work every day of this pandemic for the last 9 months. Many of them risking their own health or the health of their families in the process, and way too many of them, an increasing number of them every single day, getting sick and having to quarantine as this virus continues to ravage our communities, our workplaces, our economy, and taking its toll really disproportionately on communities of color and on Black workers across our city. So we have seen over and over again our own members and other working people across the city have to quarantine in the interest of public health, be told to quarantine, sometimes by their own employers because of exposure that took place at work. But because, quite frankly, of deficiencies in the federal legislation that passed earlier this year, received absolutely no paid compensation for that time off. So right now, we've got members like Darlene, who's a cleaner in a downtown Pittsburgh office building, who spent time with her sister. Her sister ended up testing positive for COVID-19, and so now she's got to quarantine for 2 weeks from her job as a cleaner. She's not getting paid for a single one of those days, despite the fact that she works for a huge multinational corporation. I could tell you about a security officer named Deja, who works in a Pittsburgh area hospital and ended up testing positive for COVID. She also happens to work for a huge multinational corporation. And while she's home this week and last quarantining and hoping to get better from COVID, she's not getting paid 1 single cent. Or our member in 30 TBJ shop steward, who some of you probably know, Nakia, who's a cleaner in a downtown Pittsburgh building. Her young son has COVID, and she is still going to work every single night because she has not enough paid time off to be able to allow herself to stay home with her son who's sick with COVID. It's 30 TBJ members and working people like them all across this city who are going to benefit from this ordinance the moment it passes and is signed into law. And we thank you and the mayor for having the courage to stand up and push this through. These are dark times for our city, for working people. The case numbers are bad and getting worse, and all the unfortunate predictions are that things are going to get worse over the coming weeks before they get better. And so, you know, as we see it, this ordinance and this measure is desperately needed. If anything, you know, a bit overdue. We're glad that it's going to come into play and help as many workers as possible over the coming weeks. So again, thank you all for your efforts, and thank you, Chief Gilman, for everything you've put into helping to craft this bill and make it successful.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Now, if I have to shut my volume off every once in a while and mute myself, it's because my husband's watching the Steeler game inside. So I didn't realize I scheduled the same time as the Steeler game. And so now we have Mr. Graff from the Priory. Is Mr. Graff with us?
Mm-hmm. John, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was a little clumsy getting myself unmuted.
Yeah, we all have struggles with this. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to say a few words and give you the perspective of the business community here in the city of Pittsburgh. I'm not here explicitly to oppose this legislation. As a matter of fact, I think everybody who is part of this hearing is working toward the same goal. I am the president and chief executive officer of Priory Hospitality Group. We have 4 business lines, including the Priory Hotel on the north side and the Mansions Hotel and Fifth Hotel in Shady Side. And I think everybody has acknowledged here already that the hospitality industry and the food service industry has been absolutely devastated by this pandemic. One of our business lines, the Priory, is actually shut down and has been for some number of months, and we don't anticipate opening up until next spring. Our other 2 operating business lines that are currently operating are at well under 40% of their revenues from last year. And so, you know, what we're doing is borrowing money to keep the doors open right now. That payroll protection money was nice, and it was very much appreciated, but it was intended for a 2 to 3 month period, and that was back in April and May. So that money's run out. A lot of the businesses here that are affected by this legislation, you know, I think a lot of people would consider us a small business, but we more than qualify between our 4 business lines for the full impact of this legislation. And so what I wanted to do is just share some concerns with you. Now, I understand that there have been some talks, and I personally was not part of them, but there's been some talks with the mayor's office and with members of council and with Chief of Staff Gilman. And it sounds like there's been a lot of progress made in terms of creating something that's palatable for everybody. But, you know, one point I will make is that, as everybody knows, there was the Families First COVID legislation that was passed by the federal government back in the spring, and that is, of course, set to expire at the end of this month. That Families First legislation really went by more or less without comment in the business community because there was a key element to it, and that key element was that there were tax credits attached to it. So that if you did pay those funds out, you were eligible for a tax credit, which of course is money that comes directly off your tax bill, such as it is, you know, for 2020. But it's money that comes directly off that tax bill so that you as the employer are made whole. The city's legislation does not do that and obviously can't. There's no mechanism for the make whole for this mandate. So what we're doing is we are really focusing on employers, including businesses like ours, which you know, are bigger than small and mom and pop, but you know, we're not a giant corporation either. To, in essence, put yourself in a position to borrow more money, gather more debt, of which I'm personally guaranteeing, to float this if in fact our employees take this paid time off. Our organization, and I can't speak to others, but I do know many people in the hospitality space that offer very generous paid time off policies. We offer up to 5 weeks of paid time off, depending on length of service, and everybody qualifies. So it doesn't matter if you work, you know, 5 hours a week or 40, you qualify. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily an adequate replacement for you know, this COVID emergency, but I am saying it's something to consider. And really, that's my message today, is that, you know, we really need to take a long, hard look at this and the impact that it's going to have on the business community here. A lot of people are hanging by the skin of their teeth right now, and you know, we're hoping that this isn't the thing that pushes them over the edge. So as I said, I'm not here to oppose this necessarily. I appreciate the efforts of council and the efforts of the mayor's office to craft something that hopefully can be a win-win for everybody, but there is danger here, and there's shoals that we can crash into. So I appreciate everybody's time listening to me and bringing this perspective to this proceeding, and I will be quiet now.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure they'll have some questions, but thank you very much for your comments. And we have our law department, and I don't know if they want to make a statement or just be here in case they have questions.
Yeah. They don't, Madam President.
Okay. And so with that said, I'll open it up to members of council for questions. And I know that council members have also been very busy. Councilman Kraus.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll make this very quick. My questions are more for Chief Gilman in terms of the substance of the bill. So determination for the benefit is to be made by a public official or public health authority having jurisdiction. And being that there is not a definition section per se to the legislation, can you help me understand what public official might be qualified to make the determination that this ordinance would be applicable?
In Allegheny County's case, that it really would be from a health director, the health department, and there's also medical, you know, professional in there. That would qualify, yes. So basically, the idea being, if either the county in this case does the contact tracing and calls you and says, you know, Councilman Kraus, you were exposed and you need to stay home for 10 days for 2 weeks. That would be a way, or if your doctor did.
Okay.
In the original drafting, there was some language about, which is some of the leftover we talk about things around kind of a shutdown order, a stay-at-home order. That's been deleted from the new version, and is not in there. Obviously, you know, if a business has zero revenue coming in because they've been ordered closed by the government, we don't want to add the extra burden on them.
Of course.
That's been.
My second question then goes towards the sunset of the ordinance. The language of that has changed rather significantly, and it now is dependent on the expiration of the emergency disaster declaration of either the Commonwealth or the city of Pittsburgh, whichever is the sooner of the two.
Correct. That was the original language, except for the original language had 4 weeks after the expiration, and we've changed that to 1 week post expiration. So we've shortened that period.
But it's not even 1 week any longer. That's been deleted. If I'm reading this correctly?
It should be 1 week. If something I sent you doesn't have it, then that would be a typo. It should be 1 week post expiration. I'll double check what I sent you. My version has 1 week in there.
Section E. I'm sorry, Chief. It's section 2. It is the next to the last paragraph. And then this question I think is applicable, and so I want to put it out there. The clerk got a call yesterday of an employee that wished to know if the legislation was going to be retroactive. That would that employee be able to apply for benefit for something that has happened previously? My advice, as sound as it can be, to the clerk was there is no ordinance until we actually pass it and it's signed into law by the mayor. So my understanding would be this would not be retroactive in any way. This would begin implementation upon the mayor's signature, and then anything that happened post that is what would be covered under this ordinance. I just want to make certain that people clearly understand that.
Sure, and let me first answer your last question. I see what you're saying, Councilman. Section 2 that you refer to is the expiration of the entire chapter, since this is a COVID-19 emergency ordinance. However, if you look at section D as in David, it says the sick time shall be provided for anyone who's been employed for 90 days and shall be entitled until 1 week following the official termination or suspension of the public health emergency. So while this whole ordinance would expire, the sick time itself would be there for that week.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And to your retroactivity question, of course, the city cannot do anything in retroactive nature. So no, it wouldn't be retroactive without knowing the specifics or wanting to provide any kind of legal advice to a specific case. Of course, if somebody is in the middle of mandatory quarantine when this takes effect, they could use it right away for that portion, but you would not be able to apply for previous time that you had it and apply to that. The city can't do retroactive laws.
And just to make that perfectly clear, it would be applicable in a split situation like that if criteria was met.
Correct, absolutely. And this leave is not all to be used at once. You may very well be off for 2 different periods where you're quarantining and never test positive, or you're caring for someone a week at a time. So you get the 80 hours. It does not have to be used all in one instant.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Do we have any other members?
Madam
Councilman Coghill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, so I want to thank our guests for being here. Sam, I want to thank you for the conversation the other day. John, I'm glad you're here. I did want to hear a perspective from the business world. And I'll just tell you, my first thought was, thinking regionally, I just thought, well, first of all, my principle is, I don't believe city government should be able to mandate a tax on private business, okay? However, we are in strange times and people are in need of help. And then talking to Sam the other day and conversations I had with, Labor Council leader, Darren Kelly, and our county executive and some other people, I talked it through on many, many levels and talked about, what it means to, say somebody who may want to start a software company that might project 100 employees. Who's looking for the right area to move to. I mean, right now as it stands, we don't even know how downtown is going to recover, if it's going to recover. And I thought the message that sends to somebody who's looking to move business to Pittsburgh is just kind of the wrong avenue is what I thought. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that for starters. Chief Gilman. We'll go with you
Okay,
first.
so I wasn't sure who you were
It
asking.
wasn't directed. I'm looking for a response from whoever wants to answer. Okay.
Sure. I would say, one of the number one things I would say is if you talk to a lot of business owners, particularly to your example, something in the software industry, or, Mr. Graff said he gives 5 weeks, I think is what he said. This is how you recruit. There's a big company locally who, I won't mention specific names, who currently gives 6 weeks because that's what they need to do to recruit talent. And if you look around the country, most successful businesses generally have A, better pay, and B, better policies around not only paid sick leave, but also paternity and maternity leave and other benefits, because employees today require that. So I think for a business, these types of policies make you a more attractive employer to get the talent you need to succeed and to retain employees, which of course helps your business grow and helps retention costs. Everything
Right.
is, of course, a balance, just like taxation is a balance and benefits packages are a balance. But we see, while companies are struggling, we're trying to attack the fact that we really know there are families out there who can't survive right now.
Right. And I do appreciate that. And I guess if it were statewide, I guess it wouldn't be so impactful. But now, we're competing with Dormont, we're competing with Green Tree and Mount Lebanon and all these surrounding communities as to where companies may locate. And I just think it's future revenue. John, you care to comment on that?
Yeah, I share that concern. I think it's important for the city to remain competitive. And we also have this problem with the county too. One thing we saw in the events business, and as folks may know, we have 2 prominent event facilities at our Grand Hall at the Priory and at the Mansions on 5th. And while we were, according to certain Allegheny County guidelines, having to basically turn business away or take it off the books or move it to next year, what we were seeing was a lot of clients were heading across county lines too. So, it is a delicate balance. And, I think we just have to be careful and give, a lot of thought to, especially under the current circumstances, what burns we're going to place on businesses, especially ones that are not, the large and well-capitalized ones.
Yep. And on that point, John, my main concern with this whole thing was, who are the businesses with 200 to 300 employees? Now, let me preface it by saying this. Originally, I thought, well, if somebody has plus 50 employees, just because they have that many employees does not mean that profit margin, coincides with that. But I'm beginning to find out in our last conversation in the past hour, Councilwoman Gross brought up, the point that I really wanted to hit was, who are we affecting? Now, for me, if it's affecting just the big nonprofits, and if it's our way, not to say it's intended this way solely, but if it's our way to get these employers of these huge, that employ most of SEIU, that's a different story for me. But if it's affecting somebody with 100 employees, who this can make or break them, if it's a difference between buying a piece of machinery or something that can better that business, I don't want it to hurt the middleman. If we're talking about just the big, so let me just throw a number and see if anybody has any answer for me. We have 40,000 people who are eligible for paid sick leave. How many come from Pitt, CMU, UPMC, and Highmark? Can anybody answer that for me?
If you're referencing the number of people who had no paid sick days before the 2015 ordinance was enacted, if that's what your 40,000 number is, it's probably zero.
Sam, I was speaking to, I thought Corey was the one that said it earlier, as to there's 40,000 people eligible for paid sick leave. Is that the current number of city employees?
I think what Councilman O'Connor was referencing is the number of workers who, prior to the enactment of the existing city ordinance, had 0 paid sick days whatsoever, and that number was in the neighborhood of 40 to 50,000. Those are workers who are now thankfully covered by the ordinance. That frankly, employers made the same argument then that so the questions you're raising right now, right? That if we force employers in the city of Pittsburgh to give people 5 paid sick days a year, how are small businesses going to survive? Well, thankfully that ordinance went into effect on March 15th of this year, just in time for those workers to get a few days of paid sick leave to use this year. But frankly, obviously not enough to use during a pandemic. I mean, so is that right if I respond to your question just briefly?
Sure.
The first question. So yeah, the way union leaders also want to grow the economy, right? Like my members work in commercial office buildings in downtown Pittsburgh, and it's not good for their future or our future as a union if those offices, if those buildings remain empty, and the businesses that our members clean up after can't get back in there, get back to work, and continue to grow our economy. At the same time, we have seen businesses continue to relocate into the city of Pittsburgh from the suburbs, like Philips, for example. It's a big software company in the process of moving into the city of Pittsburgh from suburban Allegheny County, despite what some have argued were anti-business regulations and ordinances already adopted by this council and Mayor Peduto, like the paid sick day ordinance, or frankly, the tax on real estate that has allowed us to invest in affordable housing in the city, which it was also argued was going to drive people into the suburbs and make people leave the city. I don't really see those scare tactics or those threats actually coming to fruition once these ordinances are really in place, because people want to be in the city of Pittsburgh because it's a great city to do business in. It's a great city to live in. It's a great city to attract talent to, and these ordinances and these kinds of policies make it an even better place to live, work, and do business. And I believe that we ought to be growing our economy in a way that makes our economy more fair and balanced, more equal, not less equal. And these are the kinds of ordinances, these are the kinds of policies that do exactly that, by attracting businesses that are going to do the right thing. And lastly, I'll point out that there is, among the changes, I think, in the most recent version of the legislation is clarifications in the section pertaining to leave policies already in place by employers, to make it clear that if an employer has already adopted a COVID-19 specific paid sick leave policy, that this ordinance and these 80 hours are not on top of, in addition to the policy they might already have in place. That's because there are actually good employers that have already done the right thing in the city, right? Like we've got employers, I know there are plenty of employers that have already done the right thing and decided that their employees should be getting paid if they've got a quarantine. Because let's face it, whatever the burden to an employer might be to have to pay people when they're home for a week or 2 weeks because they've got a quarantine due to COVID-19 illness, the burden for that family, for those working people, is a whole lot greater. We're talking about the difference between making your mortgage payment or not, making your rent payment or not. To go for 2 weeks with no income, without planning for it, and to be sick at the same time, that is such a catastrophic occasion for most working people and most families. Something that people cannot recover from in many cases. And so those employers understand that. And the burden on working people should get at least as much attention, I think, as the burden on small businesses or mid-sized businesses here.
Right, and well said, Sam. And and I'll wrap it up with me. I just really want to say, first of all, it's the message I worry about. Not this has a sunset rule. That's fine and good. I do worry about attracting businesses here. Is Pittsburgh a business-friendly city, or is it not going to be? So, and it sends a message while we, kind of sway the Amazons and try to lay out the red carpet for them and offer them all these, tax breaks and things like that, which I agree with because they bring jobs, and jobs brings, economy, and a good economy brings home buyers, and home buyers are shopping in our stores, and you can go on and on. So I don't disagree with that policy, but I guess I was more afraid about hitting the medium-sized person, but I'm starting to think that we don't have a whole lot of medium-sized people here are going to be hit. If we're talking about UPMC and, the 4 big nonprofits or 6 big nonprofits, that makes a big difference to me. So as much as I care about the economy here and attracting business, I care more about the people and the people who are working in these buildings and, trying to make ends meet. And so I will be supporting it, I will say, but not without hesitation. So that's it for me. And thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilman. Do we have any other members?
Madam President, may I?
Ms. Strasburger, oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Strasburger, and was that Councilwoman?
That
I
was,
think Councilwoman Gross had her hand up first, and I'll go after her if that's okay
Okay,
with
thank you,
you and
Councilman.
her.
thank you,
Okay,
Councilwoman.
Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Madam President. So I wanted to just expand a little bit more about that. Would someone at the table like to say why there's this exemption for employers of 50 employees and under? So that is the text in the language now, and we did have some discussion about that between members. We're wondering kind of how do we choose that point? Is that the right point? And I'll just fill in what Councilman Cockrell was referring to, that I had some years ago looked at a listing of every business in the city with its number of employees. And in your kind of learn to do in like Statistics 101, you kind of just sort from largest to smallest, and you look for the natural breaks if you're doing a frequency distribution to see like, well, how many are small and how many are medium, and what defines small and what defines medium. And I recall seeing, but I don't have it in front of me tonight, that there really were a tremendous number of businesses under 50. But a large portion of them, larger than I expected, were sole proprietors, right? Maybe people working independently, or they just had like 2 employees. I was really surprised by that. And then there was kind of a gap as you got over 50. And so I'd like to hear maybe any thoughts there about why that break point. And then I'd also like to hear from Mr. Graff. I don't think you told us how many employees you do have, because what I recall seeing was there was a kind of a gap. There's not, in my mind, in my recollection, very many businesses that have 200 or 300 employees.
I will just answer the first part quickly and then turn it over to Mr. Graff. We chose 50 very simply because it was the cutoff that the federal government chose under the RCA. I always get the order, whatever it is. The federal bill, the cutoff was 50. And so for consistency, given that there had been talk about having a small business exemption, and most cities followed 50. Some had different numbers, but almost every city had a small business exemption to it. It seemed to be prudent to be most consistent with the federal bill. So it was not based off data, it was based off federal consistency.
Sure. That makes total sense. But I do think it seems to be an especially impactful or meaningful breakpoint for Pittsburgh as well. Mr. Graff, how many employees do you have?
We have, if we're going full strength, we would have about 150 employees. That's full-time and part-time. So that's
Because you have different shifts and those kinds of things.
different
right?
shifts, and we have people that just work part-time on the weekends if they're servers or valets at events, that kind of. They
So
might work
those,
20 hours a week.
just again, I could still look at data, but just kind of anecdotally, I imagine like, so if a business has several locations, those are going to add up. But when I'm thinking about the little Main Street businesses in my district that are just one location, independent, locally owned small businesses, they're nowhere near, over 100 employees, right?
Yeah, I expect that can be a little. I'm trying to think of the right word, but our 4 business lines are broken up into 4 different LLCs, and so those employees are all employees of those LLCs. Because we have overlapping ownership, for say Obamacare purposes, we're treated as a large employer because we have overlapping ownership. So if you were to go and look at each one of these business lines, one might have 60 full-time and part-time, one might have 30, one might have 12, and so breaking that down, you'd say, okay, well, those don't look like, very big operations, but conglomerate them, they get bigger, and the responsibilities get bigger, and so do the demands on your fisc. And I think that there are a fair number of operations that are like ours, which would collaborate that way.
Yes, and certainly some very extraordinary large employers who claim in the city to have 0 employees on record. And so, yes, but that was a kind of follow-up question. I'm glad you reminded me. I was going to ask how your business was structured, because that is a concern that people would be trying to disguise, frankly, how many employees they had by using
ordinarily,
LLCs. What was that acronym that you used on your FISC? Could you explain that for the public? Thank you.
FISC, like fiscal. It's
Okay.
the base of the
So you
word
have a consolidated fiscal statement, right?
Yeah. So
because you as an LLC, you have to report on your personal income tax?
I think it's
So
reported
your
as
ownerships? The ownerships in the
It's
LLCs?
reported as a separate
Okay.
entity, so it gets filed as a corporate return.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. It's just sole proprietors, I think, who file. So, but at some point, it's obvious to, especially to the IRS, that you have a stake in each of the LLCs.
Well, yeah, they all get attached as schedules to our
Yeah.
to our income tax statements. So
Right.
yes.
Right. Just musing here. It's not really relevant to my support for the bill for tomorrow, but that there is probably also a different sort of business structures that we would see if we looked at small neighborhood businesses versus large business employers in the city.
I mean, it just depends, you know. So my wife and I own most of ours, so we're a 2-member LLC. It gets treated as separate corporations. If you have a single-member LLC, it gets treated basically similar to a sole proprietorship, but there's a lot of sole proprietorships out there, admittedly, and partnerships. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that's all. Those are questions that I was curious about. I was just trying, I think it's important for us to kind of get a grip about really what the landscape is of businesses out there in the city. And the more we know, the better policy we can make. And then also the kind of like labor force structure, like of the people who are city residents who are working, what kinds of employers are they working at? So that was my area of interest. Thank you for your answers.
You bet.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Strasburger, thank you for your patience in allowing Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to all of our guests today. I don't want it to go without saying that, you know, just as we spoke about the paid sick leave bill as primarily a bill around protection of health, this is also about the protection of health. I mean, we're at a crisis point in our pandemic. People shouldn't have to choose between staying home to quarantine themselves if necessary, or to care for a sick family member, or getting paid. If those are the choices, people are probably going to go to work and try to get paid unless they're sent home. And we don't want people doing that. We want all incentives out there for them to stay home and to get better and to not further spread this terrible disease. So I just wanted to state that. And, you know, I agree, we want to create a business-friendly economy, but we also want to create a worker-friendly economy, and we want workers to feel protected in their mind, body, and spirit. And this is one way to do that in our small way. So I'm fully in favor of it. I'm really happy that we're taking a more surgical approach to it and looking at it. And, you know, it's kudos to everyone in the mayor's office and council members who've been working on it, and others who've been at the table to make the amendments necessary and propose those amendments to council that I think will get us a little bit more to where everyone feels comfortable. I guess my main question is, given that this, like a lot of other policies we pass, is going to be is going to be complaint driven, and we have that, you know, that person set up to be able to handle the enforcement of it. How are we, is there some, and this is for Chief Gilman, I guess, is there some structured way that we are going to be promoting this to all employers, but more importantly, I think employees out there who might qualify, so that they know that they might need to be watchful of this and report if necessary?
It's a really good question. You know, I'd certainly like to work with council on how to get the word out. You know, we have been working with trade organizations like the chamber and others, and the message has gotten out. But unlike the paid sick leave where we were able to build in public comment periods and feedback and time to build in rules and regs and other things like that, we obviously are in a state of emergency where every day matters. And so the effort and support of council and structuring a way to get the message out, we certainly would welcome any suggestions you have.
I would hope that it could be a community and collaborative approach. And we don't have the equivalent of Philadelphia's labor and industry department. So we have to be a little bit creative, but hopefully with council members and with mayor's office and the power of employers as well, we can get the word out, and unions. I don't have any further questions, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think that means Council or Chief of Staff Gilman and everyone involved did a lot of behind the scenes work that minimized our meeting, the need for our questions. So thank you. Councilman Wilson, do you have, or Councilman Lavelle, do either of you have a question?
I just have one question. Thank you, Madam President. I believe Chief Gilman has said it in his opening, but the 80 hours, that is in accordance with the CDC guidelines?
Sorry, correct.
Okay.
The CDC guidelines now is 10 days, which is 80 hours.
Got it. Okay, just double checking.
Thank you, Councilman. And Councilman Wilson, do you have any questions or statements?
Yes, and I thank the time of everyone here, Mr. Williamson and Mr. Graff and Chief Gilman and Madam President for putting this together. So I really think that this, is so timely, obviously, because of what people need. Hearing personal stories of people who have been struggling during these times, and that's why I'm supportive. But for the other reason, about the health aspect and what this will really bring. I mean, this will really save lives, and I think we all see every day the amount of numbers that are on the, that are either positive or the amount of deaths that have happened in Allegheny County. And I just think it's a time of really, moving in the way of supporting workers this way. And I'm appreciative of everyone that's worked towards this bill. So I appreciate, the comments made today. And, I don't have any questions. Some of mine were already answered, and I appreciate the time of everyone here. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members?
Second round?
Second round, Councilman Kraus, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Just briefly, Chief Gilman, if there are additional, since there will be some additional minor technical amendments, forgive me, your plan for having them to us is later this evening or more than likely first thing tomorrow morning?
No, Councilman, you will have them tonight. I'll work to get them to you as quickly as possible, but it'll certainly be before I go to bed.
Yeah, I just said the right. Don't, kill yourself. I just want to make sure I watch for them. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for being here.
Madam President?
Thank you. Councilman Coghill.
Yes, just, I'll be real brief. To Erica's point, yes, Erica, you know what? You hit the nail on the head. I failed to mention that, but that did play in my decision to support this big time. It really does. Because I know if I were, tested positive and I were broke and I were physically, just not as ill as some get, then I would go to work. So you know what? That's definitely, and I wanted to acknowledge you for that. I agree with that 100%. The other thing was, John, you talked about a tax credit that the businesses may get. No.
I'm sorry, I don't recollect.
You talked about a tax credit that.
Oh, the tax credit. Yeah, that's with the federal paid leave mandate. They have the ability to offer credit just like they can print money and shut out the door to people too,
Hey, John, that seems fair to me. I mean, I'd like to see if, we put this on our businesses, some sort of tax credit. I don't know if we can do that on a city level or not, but I guess.
Well, I think something that probably everybody can agree with is that this is it is a problem that begs for a federal solution because the federal government solely has the ability to make the employers whole And even though it may create some cash flow issues immediately, you know that on the back end that
Right.
you'll be made whole. So that's to me, that's the solution. And hopefully we will get something like that will, mirror this current legislation, and we can all move forward.
Oh, I agree. That sounds like a good idea. And the last and final thing is, can I get a percentage by anybody want to take a guess? How many come from the nonprofits, workers that would be affected versus ones that are, working in some machine shop? Nobody wants to take a guess of that?
I truly have no idea.
I'm just guessing. Okay, I'll take a guess. 80%? Does that sound fair? Is it?
No, I think when you look at the large corporations in Pittsburgh,
Yeah, I guess.
I truly don't know the percent, but it would
Gotcha.
be more than that. I mean, there's a lot of big corporations.
Yeah, good point. Good point. How about this? One last
I can
question.
tell you just from my union
Sam.
limited experience, the University of Pittsburgh, Duquesne University, CMU, they've all already adopted policies that'll end up being redundant with this ordinance, while private sector multinational corporations, like, I won't name them to put them on the spot, but you can probably name one or two yourselves, have done nothing of the like.
Right. One last question. Does anybody know the people who employ our security, St. Moritz, I believe it is, do they have 50 plus employees? Or are they somebody who is affected by this?
They will be. Those are our members. Yeah, they will be affected by this, and they'll benefit from this.
That's good. I think about our security people. I love them there. They do a good job. So, okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Colquitt. And I didn't realize we are also joined by Councilman Burgess. Councilman Burgess, I apologize. Do you have any comments?
No, I was on my phone and I didn't have my picture on, so you didn't recognize the feed. But
It was the gold chain.
I was in favor of this from the beginning. I am, a staunch supporter of workers, particularly those who are unionized and at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of wages. And so we are in that time of our country where this is that pivotal moment. And we must do everything we can to protect workers, protect the health, and as a city, collectively do those things we can in unison to move our city forward.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other members? And do we have any last comments from our guest? Any final comments from our guest, starting with Chief Gilman?
I just want to thank council members, many of our labor organizations, and many of our business community. I think we have a bill that will be in front of you tomorrow for final action. It does everything people talked about. It puts the public health first. It protects workers, and it's a bill that can support business and help everyone get through this together. The bill was made stronger by conversation and compromise. And working together. So I appreciate everyone's involvement and engagement in this. None of this is easy, and everything is rushed and crazy during this unprecedented time. But I will just say I agree with Mr. Graff 100%. This would be all better solved at the federal level, like so many other things. But we have people struggling while the federal government takes no action, and this is an important step to literally save lives that we can take together.
Yes, and I do want to say just to that, I want to say that our local congressmen have been very helpful. Congressman Doyle has been very helpful to us. So I just want to say that on the federal level. He's a one man. He can't be a one man band. I'm sorry. Now, Sam Williamson, do you have any final comments?
Just to say thank you. Thanks to Chief Gilman and Mayor Peduto for making this a priority and crafting a bill that is, as he said, going to protect the public health and workers. And thanks to all of you for your great questions and for having me here and for making working people like our members across the city a priority of yours, every single one of you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Graff, do you have anything?
I do not. I do echo Mr. Williamson, though, and thanking you for giving me your time and attention at this proceeding.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you all for being here, especially during the Steeler game. I apologize for the timing. But I just want to end it with, I hope that I had this conversation with Chief of Staff Gilman and with people from various businesses and with Sam Williamson, is that I wish that you would meet more often together to work through some concerns before it gets to a point where there's legislation or other things, that we can work through concerns, because it's in everybody's best interest for us all to have a good, healthy workforce that feels valued. And that's internally, I mean, that's the same with the city, and it's the same with outside. We want people to feel valued, and we know that they will produce more and do better if they feel that way, and if they can and don't have the concerns of worrying about their health and their families and things like that. So it'd be nice to see you working on maybe a quarterly basis, meeting more frequently, the Allegheny Conference and the unions more often, to work through this stuff, so that government doesn't have to get involved, that we see that you're working through things yourselves. So I hope that those meetings are going to be scheduled. I've talked with everybody. I think that they're going to be. And if not, council will try to do our best to bring everyone together ourselves. But with that said, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.